House Republicans are making it clear today opposition to former President Trump is not allowed, especially from a member of leadership. GOP lawmakers have voted to oust Representative Liz Cheney from her position as chair of the House Republican Conference. That is the party's third highest ranking position in the House. Cheney, a staunch conservative, has repeatedly denounced Republicans' lies about the 2020 election. She was one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the former president after the January 6th pro-Trump insurrection at the U.S. Capitol that left 5 dead. After the vote, Cheney vowed to continue calling out Mr. Trump.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language. We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution, and I think it's very important that we make sure whomever we elect is somebody who will be faithful to the Constitution.
So let's bring in CBSN Washington reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill. Hi, Caitlin. So tell us how this vote played out, and do we know much about Liz Cheney's future plans now that she's been ousted from GOP leadership?
Hi, Tanya. Well, the vote today was pretty swift and unceremonious. It took less than 20 minutes for House Republicans to push Cheney out of her leadership position. They met this morning here on Capitol Hill to make that determination. It was already a foregone conclusion going into this, but it was done by a voice vote behind closed doors. What is striking, however, is that Cheney, while she acknowledges that she has lost this short-term battle, she has signaled that she is prepared to keep fighting on and is not surrendering in the larger battle for the future of the Republican Party. And to that end, she came out and addressed reporters directly after that meeting that she was ousted from leadership to make clear her position and to make clear that she is willing and ready to continue on this fight. She said that the party cannot embrace the big lie and embrace the Constitution at the same time. The question moving forward, however, is what is the constituency for that line of thinking within the Republican Party, given what we've seen today, given our polling that shows that Republicans are still very much aligned behind the former president.
And Caitlin, top Republicans are now backing New York Representative Elise Stefanik to take Cheney's position in leadership. What can you tell us about that support and opposition that she faces, and when can we expect a vote on her position to take place?
Well, we are expecting a vote on that position as early as this Friday, they announced earlier today, which shows how quickly they want to move forward with this. Stefanik is the only person at this point that has come forward to fulfill this position. She still needs to get some support from some reluctant members, especially those in the Freedom Caucus who have been calling her a liberal. She is expected to meet with them later today, we were told from some members coming out of that meeting. So she has been working on shoring up support in the party. It's also important to note, however, that she has support from former President Trump, from Leader McCarthy, and from Steve Scalise, the number 2. And so that is a significant and strong showing for her to ascend to this position. And she released a memo earlier today saying that while she's working to shore up support, vying for this position, she wants to make clear that this is a unified party, unified against the Democrats' proposals and policies and what she calls a socialist agenda. And so that is kind of her mission, to shore up that support, make clear that message. Again, the question is, can the party move on with this if the former president is continuing to talk about and relitigate the past election?
Right. And Caitlin, Cheney's expulsion from leadership does come as Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy heads to the White House along with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell to discuss infrastructure with President Biden. So in essence, you know, they have to still get about the work of legislating. Is the president still willing to work with Republican leadership, or how does that affect his relationship with Republican leadership if the party line seems to become more and more that he didn't fairly win the election. That seems to be where, where this is going. That seems to be the sort of loyalty litmus test among, Republican lawmakers.
Certainly the message coming out of today's conference meeting and our own CBS News polling shows 70% of Republicans don't think that Biden was the legitimate winner of the election. McCarthy and McConnell had aimed to move forward and to address these policy issues. At the White House earlier today, Biden was asked, can you trust McCarthy, given everything that we've seen happen this morning here on Capitol Hill? And Biden said yes. He said that he ran to be the president for all Americans, not just Democrats, and he says that he's determined to get bipartisan support for his infrastructure proposal, which of course still faces an uphill climb here on Capitol Hill with both sides very far apart. What's interesting about Biden and the Republican Party is when Biden was running, he said and kind of argued that Republicans would kind of come and have an epiphany after Donald Trump, that they would kind of come back to the table and work together. Well, that is a very different reality that we are facing at this point. Republicans have not done that. And so you've heard Biden say that he, has some questions about what the Republican Party is and stands for, but he has made the case for the importance of having a Republican Party. So we'll see how this affects negotiations. On the Senate side here, Republicans have been very determined to focus on Biden's policies. They don't want to engage in these fights that they're seeing on the House level. Again, we'll see whether they're able to bear that out.
Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill, thank you so much. And to that point of what Republicans are standing for now, I want to turn to Leslie Sanchez in Fernley, Nevada. She is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist. Leslie, great to see you. So, are lawmakers such as Liz Cheney, who are clear conservatives in their voting record and in their policy stances, but who also oppose former President Trump's lies about the election being stolen, are lawmakers such as her no longer welcome in the Republican Party?
But the party would argue it's a big tent. And for what they would say are big government conservatives, big spending kind of industrial conservatives like the Liz Cheneys, there's not another place for them to go. The Republican Party is going to continue to be a good, solid fit, but they've had to make room for more small business conservatives. And that's part of a bigger message, Tanya, that you and Caitlin were really pointing to. Liz Cheney is 25 years out of sync. She is the granddaughter of the Republican establishment that goes to her father, certainly the Bushes, Bob Dole, and you can take it all the way to Richard Nixon. And there has been a realignment of the Republican Party that was sparked by the contract with America and has continued from the 90s and is solidly this populist party that is the Republican Party today. It's very much anti-establishment, even GOP establishment, and very much for, they would argue, more common sense and uncommon courage. And that uncommon courage is to question the role of government, its impact on people's lives, and they're solidly in that camp. And that's really where the party is going to continue to move in the future.
It's so interesting because, of course, there are voters who, might side with the Liz Cheney camp. I mean, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise has said that this vote today to oust Cheney is about messaging, in the efforts to reclaim the majority in 2022. There are, of course, when you look at Liz Cheney's record, there are a few lawmakers who have as conservative of a voting record as she does. She's consistently embraced pro-business, pro-military. She's had some hawkish stances. So clearly she's not going to be joining the Democratic Party anytime soon. How do you expect the party to so how do you expect the party to tie its messaging together to not lose? Because like you said, if the GOP is seeing itself more in terms of a big tent, it certainly doesn't want to lose the Liz Cheney wing of the party in its efforts to move in this new direction that you just laid out. So, how does it plan to embrace all of that? And what is it that the GOP voters actually want?
The voters are very clear. It's interesting, Tanya, because a lot of people would dismiss how far back this goes, and you could talk about the Tea Party. The Tea Party was a big spark I previously mentioned, in igniting this effort. And you could even argue that Ronald Reagan, you haven't seen this kind of movement in the Republican Party since that time. He questioned government. He was critical of government, but not to the extent of its originality in the way that Donald Trump did. And Trump came in at a time with the America First mantra and this posture, which was questioning all establishment, public and private. That has a ringing tone that continues today. And how you weave that together, it is also a party that continues to be strong military, strong defense, but does not want to act or engage in every war, in every engagement, which is a pullback from the traditional kind of establishment hawk Republicans that we saw of another era. It's a new image, and there are so many voters who align with this. And while people try to make this the politics of personality of Donald Trump, it is much bigger than that. It is really igniting a sentiment where they want to see people in general, Republican, Democrat, Independent, a more responsive government that is attuned to their needs. But for Republicans, it's adverse to large government intrusion. So it's going to be an interesting contrast moving forward with Biden and these big government programs, and you're going to continue to see a very strong resistance from this new populist Republican Party.
All right. Well, Leslie Sanchez, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your insight into the GOP.
No, thank you so much.